Thank you for viewing my presentation on Call Me By Your Name. The original parts of this presentation were presented at the Popular Culture Association of America conference, both the annual and the Southern Division last fall. In part, this presentation has been funded by travel professional development grants from John Abbott College. Thank you, John Abbott. My name is Brian Peters, and I teach English and comparative film studies at John Abbott College in the English department, and I'm also a lecturer at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. I teach creative writing, literature, and composition to undergraduates, primarily fiction and drama. I teach for both English and theater. I'm an aspiring novelist and playwright with 2 complete novels and a play adaptation of one in progress. I am currently soliciting for literary representation, and I hope to get these projects into print soon enough. My research here and this talk is motivated in part by my own experience teaching Call Me By Your Name. One dreadful, absolutely dreadful fiasco in queer cinema, and other positive experiences in my desire in literature and film class, a class I've taught several times already. However, the decision to make this talk public comes from the absolutely overwhelmingly incredible fan base for this novel, and in particular its film version. The work I have seen on the internet, and in particular one Instagram account, will be featured at the end of this talk to emphasize the incredible impact that this film has had and continuously has on youth culture, fandom, and queer viewership. My talk today will explore campus woke and the sabotage of many faculty and students, the way we have felt due to an aggressive and combative far left. And from there, I can purge my own experience when I had Call Me By Your Name on a syllabus when I was teaching queer cinema at Concordia. I had a group of post-pandemic undergraduates and 2 TAs. The talk will defuse the role of the media in the clouding of our understanding of celebrities, as well as questions that surround cancel culture. I'll pose some problems with teaching right now, and I hope to mitigate anxious students in a very confusing world. Once everything is set up in this talk, I will explore the adaptation from novel to film, the absolutely incredible cinematography and direction of Luca Guadagnino from the screenplay by the iconic writer James Ivory. Within a close analysis of mise-en-scène, montage editing, soundtrack, lighting, and imagery, I will attempt to theorize the cult following of this film, a film that was released over 6 years ago. I'm also going to look at the exceptional artistic merit in what we see and what I understand as this cinematic treat. I'll finish my talk, as I mentioned earlier, with fan art, and in particular one incredible artist at Call Me By Your Name Journal, and this artist runs out of France. So I do urge you to check out this artist's AI generated images and what the artist actually writes from scratch on a kind of continuation of Elio's journal from the period of time when Oliver visits him during that summer where his life changes. Thank you again for listening. I hope you like my talk, and moreover, I hope this talk gives you what you need, especially if you're faculty, to teach the kind of work that you're impassioned about. I also hope that this talk can show us to question, challenge, and step back from media rumors and related forms of cancel culture. The foundation of my talk today is going to place itself in post-pandemic syllabus design. It's important, especially as we come up against students who may be resistant to certain materials, to realize that coming out of the pandemic, entering into the effects of climate change and the kinds of wars we've seen going on over the last couple of years, has caused a serious amount of anxiety. This accumulated anxiety piled already upon being prisoners at home as either late teens and young adults during the lockdown, I feel has resulted in a kind of trauma, and very much so. A lot of the behavior that we're seeing reflects a kind of PTSD. This could come as a knee-jerk reaction to syllabus design, to materials chosen by course instructors, as well as sometimes combative energy within the classroom. Our goal as faculty is to figure out how to approach reactions, how to make sure our students are heard, but figure out a way to kind of sideline what they might be aggressively combating and reintegrate them into the classroom itself. Remember, it's a student's choice to take your work. For example, if you're teaching 19th century American literature, a lot of the language used is language we as faculty would never go near. Students need to be mature enough to realize the materials that they're looking at will have a particular lexicon that is indeed troublesome, but it also allows for very teachable moments. Likewise, be aware of cancel culture. For example, teaching 20th century African American literature would come with particular vocabulary, a very particular lexicology tied to the slave trade and the dehumanization of African Americans. Imagine if any of us thought of canceling out fiction by Toni Morrison or James Baldwin, to name but two incredible authors. We need to figure out ways to stand behind our syllabi and make sure our classrooms stay peaceful and organized. As we'll get to in a moment, Call Me By Your Name has a series of potential triggers prior to this kind of actor scandal that happened, I guess, within the year after the release of the film, maybe 2 years. So I've created this particular visual to set up the differences between the novel and the film and place a lot of merit in negotiating some of what students see as problematic in the novel and realizing that the film attempts to negotiate those spaces rather intensely and completely. The beautifully crafted novel by Andre Aciman has a very particular voice. The voice of the novel attempts to give agency to 17-year-old Elio through presumably an older version of himself. As a result, students often feel that there is a gaze within the novel itself which can be deconstructed as predatorial. Taking this somewhat seriously, I went back to do another reading of the novel. I'm uncertain if I can side with the students 100%, but there is certainly something within the novel that most definitely eroticizes Elio. This is the author's choice, and I think what we're supposed to see in the novel is that Elio may be 17, but he's also triggered by his desires, as many young people are. And the larger rhetorical question that surrounds his characterization deals with giving agency to young people. Nobody chooses when they are triggered or not triggered. And Elio, as his parents reveal, deserves to have a chance to love on his own terms. The obstacles with the reading stem from this very particular student interpretation. And I feel the strengths of the novel is, of course, a longer story arc with more details in response to what happened after that summer. Dealing with a film format, as we all know, means we have to take a novel and turn it into roughly 110 pages of screenplay. Call Me By Your Name is a slightly longer film, just slightly longer. And Luca Guadagnino has, I think, if I'm correct through my research, up to 4 hours of tape, which he edited down into 2 hours and 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, 2 hours and 24. One of the two. I should know it, but there's my humanity coming through. James Ivory's adaptation does a serious shift, that because it has to storytell in a different way, there are redoings of what happens within the novel. The question of the gaze is completely non-existent, that we don't have a narrator showing us this particular story. And since we have a tightening of the storyline, the adaptation done through the cinematography, if reveals the only kind of sexuality, eroticization of the character of Oliver. It remains by and large Elio's story. The film is Elio's story, and Elio, through Timothée Chalamet's portrayal of the character, embodies both a kind of innocence as well as a kind of triggered young person that we see in the original novel version. There's a lot of heart in this screenplay. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of heart in this novel. This novel is an incredible novel. But the film really uses facial expressions and, as we'll look at soon, a very particular set of images and thereby imagery to emphasize how Elio's heart works and how important desire is for this young person to understand himself. There's a shifting of the gaze, and this is due to, in part, the adaptation of the screenplay itself and the cinematography, and I'll have a chance to look at this in a little bit. To me, there is no predatorial gaze in the film at all, and instead, the use of the panorama, the mise en scène, the pastoral, as I'll look at in quite a bit of detail, really emphasizes this kind of Eden-like setting where Oliver and Elio can discover each other on their own terms. There's a visual language that exists by Guadagnino, and this is his incredible, incredible art as a filmmaker. I'd like you to think about the use of the panorama, the use of the close-up, the use of montage editing at integral points, and these can just be our starters to refresh your memory about how the film works and what makes it so special. Just created two very different paradigms from the two different texts, so I'm going to backstep now and talk about sensitivities in negotiating spaces. Can students bully within a given class? Absolutely. What happens when we think about the word woke, which many of us now are rejecting? That woke is this form of the left attempting to isolate an underdog and battle on for it has really become, I think, still part of a left, but in many ways students have kind of taken control of campuses, as we certainly have seen. Many course instructors feel that their passions, their syllabi, the ways in which they present material end up being aggressively questioned by students. And it seems whenever anyone tries to defend themselves in response to a woke complaint, the strange term ableism is used, and all of a sudden someone who challenges something woke becomes guilty of this woke crime. How do we negotiate our spaces? Think about our syllabi design and related faculty reservations. If a program chair or a chair, whoever is proofing your syllabi, has a particular issue with a particular text, this is something worthy of discussing. Nobody wants to arrange a course and go into a kind of battle zone. But we also have to be able to look at the art that we love and have a chance to teach it from the angles that we feel are suitable. In teaching a film like Call Me By Your Name, where there are age differences between the characters, 17 to 24, and this is a decent age difference, we need to be able to remind students that these characters are fictional, that the characters of Romeo and Juliet, for example, are significantly, well, not quite significantly, but they are younger than Elio, and that young people do have desires. We'll also notice that in the film version, as in the novel version as well, the parent figures are incredible, as they do allow Elio to have some kind of agency and voice in trying to figure out where his desires lie. The sensitivity that lies in the post-pandemic film rumors about Armie Hammer do raise issues in a given class. I've taught Call Me By Your Name successfully sometimes, and I had the misfortune of teaching it in a class I was so hopeful about, a class that focused on queer cinema. I had two very upset teaching assistants, one seemingly hysterical, the other just kind of caught off guard, and a number of students who, during the break time, after I gave a thorough introduction to the Socratic model of desire and the way that it's echoed in the film, the reasons for echoing desire between men in this way, the use of classical Greece or the ancient world in response to crystallizing the desire of these characters, my TAs brought to my attention through emails that students were freaking out because of the Armie Hammer allegations. I went back to the class after the break, let the class decide, and due to, and it was a pretty good split of rather hostile students that this shouldn't be taught and I shouldn't be teaching it and blah, 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 and I should have known about the allegations. At that point in time, the allegations were in the 2021 March edition of Vogue at the back, and the allegations have proven completely and totally untrue. The only allegations that are true against poor Armie appear to be substance addictions, and I would think we would be able to be compassionate with that, but it seems that any of the horrible rumors that have ruined his career, at least for now, proved untrue. Nonetheless, because of the student reaction, I opened up a class discussion, said it is on the syllabus and students are welcome to write on it, as many did, by the way, and that I wouldn't screen the film during class time, and instead we continued the discussion. I'm not quite sure I did the best thing. I should have given leave to the students to leave who didn't want to address the material and still had the film screened. But I think because my TAs were seriously, I'd like to say unprofessional, but that even seems a little harsh. They were just immature in response to dealing with this. I think I backed down, and possibly too much, as students had just gone back to campus and there was a lot of combative stuff going on in many classes at many universities. Do we embrace cancel culture? Absolutely not. One student felt that they wanted to teach the film. They wanted the film to be screened in a defense of art for art's sake and understood the film in response to its artistic merit. I still to this day feel I shouldn't have backed down, but I guess there's nothing I can do to change the past. In short, we need to remind students that with media and the media that we see, anyone could publish anything on anyone, create all kinds of supposed screenshots, and blame anyone of anything. Imagine, and my favorite example that I would use is an out gay professor. I said a woman student could easily accuse me of sexual assault. Anyone who knows me knows this would never be possible, but I would be guilty until proven innocent, and that student's accusations would, I presume, have to go through all of the official university channels. So we need to really be aware of setting healthy boundaries for students to understand what they read, to veer away from Hollywood gossip, and to focus on writing about what impassions them, not listening to hearsay and attempting to tie it to the art they love best. At the end of the day, Call Me By Your Name's screenplay was written by a senior gay writer, and the director lives an out homosexual lifestyle. So I think this movie, in other words, the film version of the novel, has an integral importance within the canon of queer cinema. And I don't think any student should have the right to debunk it. They might not like the film, and that's fine. Our students are not going to love everything that we have on a given syllabus. How do we merit great art? Call Me By Your Name the 2017 film has a series of important images and messages that run consistently throughout the film. It remains a vital contribution to popular culture with integral underpinnings that reach a younger audience and have shaped positivity. As we'll look at towards the end of this presentation, the base of fan art that is still generated right now, so years later, demonstrates that this film has an incredible amount of power. What we need to think about is a sad history of queer cinema and masculine desire, looking at characters who are isolated, beaten, shunned, murdered, just horrible realities which seemingly follow a very often cliche vision of who might be the gay male. This film begins a kind of shift in the way that we can look at desire between two men. What we also have to be aware of with male love in the 1980s is that by the early 1980s, the pandemic of AIDS and horrible stigma against queer men, gay men, existed. This film gives us a way to look at the 1980s, the early 1980s, just as AIDS was breaking out and would soon enough reveal how devastating it proved to be. So this film has an important contribution in its creation of not just masculine desire, but also a pastoral which somehow thwarts the reality of AIDS that's in the process during the period of time, the summer of 1983 in the film version. Visual language in cinema is of course different from the novel format, which relies generally and most effectively on mimesis, ekphrasis, catharsis. We can't really have an ekphrasis in a film because a film is visual. So it needs to rely on its imagery, the way that it's shot, and then of course the way that it's edited to get the vision of the director to where that director might want it to be. I feel cinema is thereby a very unique medium. We're also accustomed to a 2-hour film. So we're given not just a time frame, but a particular way of getting a story across within that time frame. This is primarily based on, as I've mentioned, editing, and of course, camera shots, angles, and particular kinds of intentions. Try watching your favorite film and freezing it during important scenes at different points. You're going to catch information, visual information, and thus the visual language of the text in ways that you probably wouldn't have thought about prior. Call Me by Your Name uses the panorama. It opens up and then closes in. I feel to reveal to us that within the setting of the film, there is the possibility for desire to flourish, i.e. the large panorama. This panorama also anticipates and negotiates the use of the pastoral, which borrows directly from the novel, that Oliver and Elio have a kind of Eden-like haven where their desire can flourish. Pastoral comes from either the Latin or Greek, pascere, to graze, and makes reference to the ancient Greek lyric poetry, shepherdesses, goat herders, these wonderfully naturalistic environments where desire can just be. You can think of Shakespeare's As You Like It and the construction of Arden, the Forest of Arden rather, as a place where Rosalind and Ganymede can really negotiate their desires. And that's worthy of another presentation, by the way, as their desires are highly complicated. As Rosalind, for the bulk of the play, presents herself as a man, and arguably Orlando falls in love with her more in her guise as Ganymede. Back to Guadagnino's use of the pastoral in Call Me by Your Name, the pastoral is accompanied very often by the panorama and then the close-up. When the close-up and sometimes the montage happens, the audios come in. 3 different kind of audios exist within the film itself to jar the way that we're supposed to think about what we're looking at. The 1980s, and you might find this harsh, I actually find the 1980s soundtrack in the film weaker. I would have liked a lot more. The successful contemporary audio is really what works. And the heartstrings that are amplified through the guitar strings of Sufjan Stevens's work is really used extensively in this film, and well. This contemporary audio shows us the aching of Elio's heart, but there's also a kind of post-Edwardian secret language that exists within the film, and Elio shows us this through his ability to play and interpret and joke with, as he does with Oliver, classical music, something he never really answers. I'll leave the last audio up there for the audience to figure out. What does the use of classical music say about Elio and desire in the film Call Me By Your Name? To really push the love that Oliver and Elio feel, as star-crossed lovers, I've included 2 images alongside here that demonstrate Guadagnino's consistent use of heart-shaped imagery. You'll find this in many other spaces within the film by simply freezing it, or if the scene is slow enough, watching it. This is a beautiful way to rethink masculine desire, especially during the age of AIDS. Oliver and Elio, be it, I'd say Elio consistently, but especially when Oliver and Elio get together, they seem to be consistently housed in this heart shape. And Elio's pining, which is in the lower panel, is also in this heart where he's waiting for Oliver to come home, a heartbreaking scene. He sees Mafalda, who works as I think the kitchen domestic, but she does more. She does laundry too. So she's the domestic in the house. And he says, Dove Oliver, and she's like, he's out, he's not here. And Elio's pining moves on with the Sufjan Stevens audio, and our hearts break for him. When Oliver and Elio finally get together, and after they couple and meet on the balcony, very much like Romeo and Juliet, there's 2 kind of balcony scenes. One in the image you see, and one on the one right before they couple for the first time. I urge you to rewatch these sequences and think about Romeo and Juliet. These sequences, the first balcony scene actually has no words. And then the one where they're sitting in this beautiful heart shape holding hands, and your heart breaks again. They talk freely. God, I was so stupid to waste so much time. And they realize that they're on a clock, that Oliver's going to head back to the United States, and their love affair will be dampened by an ocean and life, and of course their age differences. But there's a non-judgmental emphasis demonstrated through the cinematography that's evident here, the heart. When examining Call Me By Your Name, pretty much from the get-go, the fan art demonstrates to us how much this film changed queer lives. Who are these fans, right? Who are these people who make these emotionally jarred illustrations? The top one is an illustration. The bottom one is a watercolor. The artists are in all my slides. Lumani's demonstrates the passion that Elio can't name but feels with Oliver, and the love Oliver feels for Elio, even though he knows he can't live the kind of life that Elio might want him to lead because of his responsibilities in the US. I think both of these deal with the exact same scene, and the second one by Belindiz Juncal shows us the tenderness that exists within the not just love but sadness that plagues these lovers because time is running out. This scene takes place right after the kind of odd peach sequence, which when I read it in the novel, I was like, what? And then when I saw it on film, I was like, oh. And what's interesting with the film, Chalamet in an interview actually said to Guadagnino, I don't know if I can do this properly. And Lucas said, we'll shoot it. And if it doesn't work, we leave it out. And he kept it because, of course, the peach is a kind of forbidden fruit. And aside for reference to a Houseman poem, there is that understanding that what Oliver and Elio have is forbidden during this period of time. And this kind of forbiddenness really is what affects Oliver's decision to get engaged in my reading of the novel and the film. So the lower panel is Oliver trying to figure out what's up with Elio. And what's curious in this film is there's a lot of times where the lovers don't talk enough. There's some communication missing. And Elio, right before the hug that you see and right before the scene cut, yelps, I don't want you to go. And for most of us who are watching the film as a repeated study, we pause it here. His grief, his sadness, and his love are felt. And this is the art of mise-en-scène, editing, and good acting. One fan artist who is still active calls themselves Elio's Journal. We've chatted a bit on Instagram. I don't know the pronouns or preferred identity of this person. He, she, they refers to themselves as Ollie. I don't know if that's a code name. I know they're in France, so I don't know if it's an Olivia, an Olivier, no clue. And it doesn't matter because this artist uses AI to generate, and I urge you to check them out, gorgeous, beautiful panels of the couple after the film ends in this imagined continued relationship that transgresses the spaces of time, i.e. Oliver either doesn't return or returns for visits. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It just clearly goes beyond the film. What's so moving and so merit-worthy with this young artist and writer is that there are a series of images followed by a written panel from Elio's journal, written by this Instagram account holder. Beautifully written feelings about how this person imagines Elio's feelings for Oliver to be. Just think of that. Think of that collective unconscious. Think about that collective imaginary. Think about the way that this film motivates artists to produce work that holds the passion that they see in this film. Note, I cannot copy more, and this was the only image I could copy and paste from the internet from this account. Simply go onto the account listed here and you will see what I'm making reference to. It is impressive and amazing. Teaching Call Me By Your Name is very rewarding. I find that most of the young people, I'd say all of them, I had one reaction once from a student who is troubled by the age differences between the characters, and I reminded her, I said, they are fictional. They are fictional. Has been amazing. These students have been so touched continuously by this film. I teach it at the end of my comparative studies in literature and film class, so desire in literature and film, and the students at this point in the term, so their term paper is done beforehand, they can do an oral presentation or a creative project, and the work that I've seen from their perceptions of this film based on course content has been incredible. This, of course, could speak to how come the film has spoken to thousands upon thousands, millions, who knows, of young, presumably queer kids and adults. From a merit-worthy standpoint, the film releases stigma from the age of AIDS, right? It is a recreation of history, so it has the ability to position itself sort of outside of New York and San Francisco and London during this time, create this pastoral for the characters, and move forward with its story arc, which is really just a summer. Moreover, this film is beautifully done, as this presentation reveals, and its merit, by me, remains secondary to the laurels it received. The film was done on a shoestring budget. It was put off for years, even though Chalamet was cast or potentially cast by Ivory years beforehand, because of not having a production budget. It did amazing at Cannes, and I think Sundance as well, but I know at Cannes. And from there, it went to the Toronto International Film Festival, the New York Film Festival, and it received so much praise in the early months of 2018, and then was released nationally, internationally, and did incredibly well. Guadagnino is a master of his art, and James Ivory is just such a talented screenwriter, having an incredible story by Andre Aciman to work with. But what also needs to be emphasized in this talk, to help create a counterpoint to the allegations, and the Hollywood stuff, of which, we never really know what's true and what's not true, save in an April 2023 release. Armie Hammer's lawyers said the allegations were all not true. Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer have a series of lovely interviews available on YouTube through an easy search. They are charming and outgoing, and they reveal a particular responsibility to the portrayal of gay characters, desires that aren't part of who they are. They reveal an incredible sense of professionalism in what they wanted the product of the film to do once it was released. They worked very hard at creating a romantic chemistry. Their interviews attest that they always had chemistry as friends, spending a ton of time in Crema bonding, doing what Oliver and Elio do in not their private time, but in their general spare time, cycling, eating, grabbing ice cream, talking and connecting. And there is one interview, and I wish I remember which one it is, and then I can get to the Ellen interview, where both actors explain that they did rehearse making out so that when they were filmed in passionate or romantic kisses, they knew how to interact with one another. Chalamet has it's a really funny interview on Ellen, where he talks about razor stubble and razor burn from all the kissing he had to do with Armie. And it's really rather charming, but it shows you how professional these actors are and how come this product worked not just well upon its release, but also how come it still works today. Why so many queer kids and queer adults or adults love this film. Teaching practices in EDI. So much of our teaching practices are surrounded by what all universities have is equity, diversity, and inclusion. So very important. One faculty member mentioned that a chair had mentioned to them that we needed to be careful about teaching our own identities. I have a lot of trouble with this. I've seen, for example, one queer woman of color teach only queer women of color in her courses. Her hands are never slapped for that, but it appears that faculty who are either perceived or present or both as white need to be extra careful to not have too much white work on a given syllabus. I'll just leave that out there for you to think about. I try to keep my syllabi diverse, but I wouldn't police someone else's. The choosing of course materials. We need to be able to choose materials that reveal not just our passions, but our research and publication expertise. This is integral. We need to reveal integrity to what we do in the classroom to reflect our areas, plural, of expertise. If we find ourselves in a teaching situation where something combative or hostile takes place, our goal is to make sure the student's heard and then move forward. A nice trick when in a touchy situation could be, thank you so much. That's great. We need to move forward with the syllabus so that we can move forward and make use of our class time. Always draw yourself back to the legal document of your course syllabus to make sure you're moving forward at a proper pace. Remember, students can debunk you, and they can create potentially uncomfortable environments for other students, not just faculty. I taught a course last winter, and one student showed up the second class, and because the content of the course was queer, the student felt he needed to, we were a small group, so all students had the ability, I asked them to introduce themselves, blah, blah, blah. He felt, for whatever reasons, he needed to say he was straight. I made sure he felt welcome, that I reminded him that all of my classes, regardless of content, are welcoming to any student who wishes to take the course. A young woman from the back of the class, who was politely combative, put up her hand and said, I don't think making a queer, as it was a queer themed course, by the way, a queer space open or welcoming to straight people should be our priority. Sure, I could have had a huge fight about that, but I didn't. I said, all right, I make sure my classes are inclusive. It's important to me. Let's move on with the syllabus. She dropped the course, thank the gods. This kind of student has the ability to poison an entire classroom. So how do we negotiate these spaces when students say comments like that? There's no easy answer. Be gentle but firm and just try and keep things moving forward. And the most important part is if a student doesn't like your syllabus, they can drop the course and take something else. At the end of the day, your program chair approved it, so you're ready to go, and you should stand by your materials with pride. And our last slide with more amazing fan art looks at friendships, allegations, and current updates. As I mentioned, Armie Hammer has denied publicly any of the allegations that basically ruined his career. His friendship with Timothée Chalamet is presumably on the down low. They appeared very close after the filming, and then once the allegations started, I'm presuming legal counsel had Armie retreat. Is their friendship still intact? What else has been ruined by allegations that are said to be completely and totally untrue? We need to think about, as faculty and as human beings, what cancel culture means and try and figure out a way to cancel out cancel culture. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I look forward to reading and responding to your comments below. I love this film. I think the chemistry that the actors bring are so important. Their sexuality doesn't mean anything to me. They were the best chosen for this job. They won these contracts, and I don't think Call Me By Your Name could work the same way with any other actors. Thank you.